Yeah. So what do you think it means to be a good man? What's a good man to Jason?
Yeah, so immediately what comes to mind when I think of a good man is I think of my father. And the way that I kind of describe him to people is that he was the umbrella for people during their storms and the rainbow for it after.
Wow.
And to me, that was a good man because he was there to support somebody and to help them and to build them up when they needed it. But then he'd be the first guy to crack a joke or make you smile when it's time to celebrate. And to me, that's a man, someone that works on building somebody else up and puts other people before himself sometimes, and just is always there when you need him.
That's beautiful. I don't know if I've heard that before. It's so awesome. An umbrella during a storm. What a loving description of your dad. Um, so give me, can you think of any examples to like concretize that? Like how because it's hard to like people tell you to be supportive, but how do you really show someone like, hey, I'm here for you? How did he do that, or and how many you have learned from that?
Yeah, so I saw that so many times throughout my time with him, and unfortunately, he passed away when I was 11. So I didn't have him for the majority of my life. But up until age 11, I was picked on a lot for being overweight in school, and I would come home and be feel really defeated. And every night we would just lay there and talk. And he would just listen, and he would tell me, you're a lot more than what those bullies are saying you are, and you've got an amazing group of friends. And he would point out the highlights and just be there to listen to me and to hold me when I cried. And to me, that is being supportive of someone. That's being there. He did it again with my mom, who battled anxiety disorder, and she would have episodes where the anxiety would take over, and she'd have the physical symptoms, the mental symptoms. And again, he would drop everything and he would become this kind of, cushy teddy bear in a way. He was this strong 6 foot man, did construction work his whole life, but he would turn into a giant teddy bear as soon as my mom started to experience those anxiety symptoms. And I think to me that's how you can show support, is to just be there and to not be ashamed or afraid of how other people are going to perceive you in that moment. Just simply being there for that other person.
Yeah, that's lovely. I mean, it's so important to have both sides, and you hear people say, "Oh, he's a good listener," or "She's a good listener," and it's not really a tangible concept, but you can kind of feel it when someone's really listening, and there's no response being pried out. It's just purely a presence. I support you. I feel what you're feeling, and it's so important, especially. I mean, you brought up bullying. I think it gets unfairly accepted as a weird rite of passage, like, oh, it's bullying in school. But as a kid, it's your entire world, and it's like it feels like imminent danger, and your whole presence is being questioned. It's this terrible feeling. And I only know those feelings because I felt it in flashes too, and it sucks when you go into school and people are mean to you for no reason, and you're questioning why are people being mean to me? So having someone in your corner is so critical, and it's really like lovely to hear that you had that support. And I had that support too, and I can't really imagine how much harder it would have been without it. And so yeah, I think that's a beautiful example of like what a good man is, and a good definition. Um, for what it means to you.
Mhm.
Um, I guess contrasting that, or maybe not contrasting. What do you notice? What do you observe in the world around you, for how men either pursue the ideal of a good man? Um, how does it match up with like what your ideal of a good man is? It sounds like your supportive father is fits that.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of us who kind of have a similar definition of that being a good man. But unfortunately, I think as a society as whole, we still have a lot of those very unhealthy gender norms that are out there, such as a good man being strong and protective of the family and not showing emotions or not showing any weakness. And to me, I think that is still evident a lot in the media, especially on social media. I think we see that a lot, especially kind of with the communities that I interact with on social media. I see it a lot where it's good men are defined by their physical attributes more so than their mental attributes. So that's very difficult. When I was growing up, already in second grade, I had this idea of what I thought was a good man, and it was that strong, silent, brave man, which was the complete opposite, really, of what I was experiencing with my dad at home. But it was this influence that I was getting from society already at that young age. And I think about a time when I was stung by a bee in elementary school on the playground, and I refused to say a word to anybody because I didn't want to be the crybaby. I
Mm.
didn't want to show any emotions or show any possible sign of weakness. And already in second grade, I was getting that kind of those social norms, those gender norms were already starting to infiltrate my life. Even though I had this example of a good man at home, it was what everybody else in society was kind of telling me a guy should be.
Yeah, it's amazing how early it enters a young boy's consciousness of what the superhero is, or the brave man or the strong man is. The B example is really poignant for that. I mean, I can think of a bunch of examples in movies of just like the brooding, strong, dark, tortured soul who's the like protagonist, like the Batman or the Superman, and they don't really need anything, right? Like they don't need the community, they don't need the a women around them or a partner or a mom. It's just like they're the lone stark figure, and that's a pretty lonely way to go through
Mhm.
life. And I think the physical attributes are also really important, right? Because it's has such a strong weight in our cultural consciousness. And like you said, even in second grade, you kind of had this image of what it might be. What was your experience learning that there might be something more important than like the six pack? How did you develop that?
Yeah, so that was very difficult for me, and I'm actually in recovery for an eating disorder
Mm,
because I had become so obsessed with this diet and exercise, trying to get that six pack or get those biceps. Because you go on social media and some guy flashes a six pack and he's got thousands of likes. Meanwhile, I go on there and open up my heart and I'll get one like. It's one of those things where it makes you feel inferior and it makes you feel less than when you see somebody do these things. So it makes you think that you pursue this physical specimen that a guy is supposed to be, that's supposed to be powerful and popular and happy, and it can have unhealthy consequences like it did in my case with the development of an eating disorder. And it's only been through recovery now that I'm learning that those things will never define me, that there's a lot more to me than those physical attributes. But I think we live in a society where physical health is often prioritized over our mental health. So it makes it very difficult because when you ask somebody what's health, they're more than likely going to say something diet or exercise related. Mental health isn't going to come to mind right away. But that's kind of how I've been able to take those steps towards gaining a healthier perspective of who I am and my body from a physical standpoint. It's through, realizing that mental health is just as important to my health as physical health is.
hmm. Yeah, I mean, so many important concepts there. I think one of them is that, like you said, when people ask about health and they think of the physical health, I think there's a conception that if you achieve that perfect body, all your problems are solved, because
Mm.
it's really selling this full lifestyle around the physical body with the thousands of likes and a flashy car. And so it that even adds further weight to the pressure of achieving the perfect body as a man. Um, and just thank you for being open with your own experience. I mean, it's vulnerability is a strength, and it's clear you've come so far to this place where you can kind of describe it to me, a relative stranger. So that's really awesome, and kind of congrats on getting working through your recovery process, and that challenge. And it's it it kind of fits with the theme where it kind of entered your consciousness so early on of like what the perfect male looks like. Um, and I think it's a further undeveloped area for men. I think eating disorders for women has been developed in conversation. Of course, it's a struggle for both, but I think there's a mismatch in terms of the resources and the fluency that guys have with that topic. Were you able to find any community working through that? Did you find it challenging to find like similar champions for your cause in that recovery?
Yeah, so in a way, I've had to cultivate my community for that. It was one of those things where my eating disorder went on for about 15 years unchecked because I think, first of all, people didn't think it could happen to me. They didn't think guys developed eating disorders. I didn't think guys could develop eating disorders because you don't hear many of them talk about it. So it was one of those things where at the start of my treatment, I questioned whether I was sick enough for help, whether I even needed help. When I started looking for help, it was all these images of females everywhere. So again, it made me feel like I was just out on an island, and something must be wrong with me. Why am I the only guy that's battling an eating disorder right now? But luckily, through my advocacy work, I've been able to connect with other men around the world who have faced similar experiences to my own. And we are all kind of, staying connected, and we share our stories and stuff. But it's definitely one of those things that we need to keep talking about, and to break down those stereotypes that exist around eating disorders, because they don't discriminate. They can happen to anybody out there. So I think the more guys that talk about it, the better we'll be able to change that narrative, and hopefully build a supportive community for men to talk about struggles when it comes to eating.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome that you and such hard work to build a community, but so necessary. And I think for a lot of the male specific issues, that's a theme I hear in having a lot of these conversations. That we got such a great response from our last post, just asking guys to share their story, and whatever challenge it might be. I've heard a lot of I wasn't able to find guys around me that they like all right on the island. I felt like the only one. I'm the only guy who's short. I'm the only guy who's uh, losing my hair early. I'm the only guy who can't talk to his dad or whatever it might be. The community element of peers is so important, and that's kind of what we hope like a video library of all these different experiences can really help with. So I really appreciate you sharing that. The other question I wanted to ask you was how how you developed your, or I guess do you feel like you have a healthy framework for masculinity, and how might you have you learned that? I've found that a lot of people who are interested in talking to us have um, some fluency, and like I feel like I have a healthy outlook on masculinity, and I'm always curious to how they've developed it. So over the years, you kind of mentioned a distinction between your definition of a good man versus society's. How did you learn or develop that healthy masculinity framework?
Yeah, so for me, I had to first take an academic approach. I started, studying a lot of research, and that's kind of how I started my eating disorder treatment as well. And they kind of went hand in hand there for a little bit, where I was just trying to gain as much knowledge as I could, and look into studies, and more importantly, start to listen to other men's stories. And I think that was extremely powerful for me. I say that storytelling is like our superpower, and being able to hear other men speak up and share their stories and their experiences with me started to kind of clearly define what healthy masculinity should look like. And another thing that I've done is through my advocacy work, just having conversations with other men and figuring all of that out. I read several books, and they've also kind of helped me get that understanding. And the one thing that I've learned is that masculinity is a very individualized thing. And I think we hear so often the term toxic masculinity thrown around, and it makes some men feel like, they're toxic just for being a guy.
Yeah.
And what I try to advocate for is the fact that masculinity only becomes toxic when we start to apply those gender norms, when we start to apply those social norms. There's going to be some men out there who just are not very as comfortable sharing their emotions or might be a little bit more guarded. And then there's going to be men out there who are more emotional and share their emotions more often. Neither one of those is unhealthy if they're doing what their authentic person should be doing. So I think it's very important that when we look at masculinity, it's that we take this individualized approach. And I think it's been through listening to other people's stories and having conversations with other men that I've been able to realize that, yeah, all of our stories are going to be a little bit different. But at the end of the day, we're all going to have challenges. We're all going to have obstacles. We're all going to have insecurities that we're battling. So we might as well start speaking up about them to break through that stigma.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned your advocacy work, and so I in how we share, if there's a way you want us to integrate like a website or an Instagram or a book you've read, a resource, I would love to like make the how we share your work collaborative if that's something of interest. I just wanted to plug that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I actually released my book Starving for Survival
Oh,
earlier
nice.
this year, which is
Congrats.
just a memoir over my entire journey from childhood, from those bullies during my childhood, all the way up to the lessons that I've learned now in my recovery and in the advocacy work that I do.
Wow, amazing. Congrats on getting it done. I mean, a book is a monumental achievement. I have dabbled in writing recreationally, and I've always been mind blown at an author who can put it all together in a book. So, congrats on getting through the writing process.
Yeah, it was a really healing process for me because I think so often when we're living our stories, we don't realize the full what really is going on or what we're really experiencing. But when I was able to kind of take that objective, almost editor type of view to my story, I was like, wow, this guy really went through a lot, and he really is enough. And I think I was able to get a better perspective of my own story through writing it.
Yeah, so cool. It's like it's almost like third partying yourself, and you
Yeah.
see you can kind of empathize like, all right, wow, like this guy really made it through and did something awesome and got through to this healthier side.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's easier to have empathy for the third party version of yourself. I have found, and it's quite
Yeah.
powerful to be like, I love Henry, or as opposed to just thinking about it echoing in my own head for myself. I find it quite powerful to zoom out and give myself self love from kind of an aerial view.
Yeah, yeah, that was a big turning point for me in my recovery, and it came because I didn't know how I was going to tell my friends. I didn't know how I was going to tell the people closest to me that I'd been battling this eating disorder for 15 years and hadn't said a word to anybody about it. And my therapist encouraged me to write my story, and it was through writing my story that I was like, wow, I can actually learn to love myself and accept myself for who I am. And yeah, that was a big moment for me.
That's awesome. And it's, I think we as men build up, I do this with small things through big things, build up like telling people, whatever it
Mhm.
may be, this kind of like opening up. Um, at least for me, I build it up into something big. You mentioned your therapist helped you. Did you have a similar? Because I find a lot of men struggle with the first step outreach, like Googling how I need a therapist near me, set up an appointment. Did you find that struggle in in getting access to therapy? Was that something you debated for a while, or is that an easy step and the friends was the harder step?
Yeah, so it's almost like you've already read the book because I talk about this. It was very difficult for me because I was diagnosed with an unspecified eating disorder, anxiety, and OCD from my primary care physician. And when I asked him who I should reach out to, what next, he said he didn't really know, that I should go home and Google and look, since it's a unique situation. And I went home and I looked and I reached out to probably 20 or 25 therapists. And unfortunately, a lot of them were booked. Some of them, weren't comfortable taking on my situation. And again, it really made me question whether I was sick enough for help or if I was worthy for help. And I think in a lot of ways, it was easier for me to admit I needed help than to actually find the help that I needed, because it was definitely difficult. And when I think about then opening up and sharing it with my friends, that was probably a little bit easier than it was actually identifying a therapist, because that was quite a process all in its own.
Hmm. Yeah, it's the access and matching to a therapist is very difficult, particularly because it often comes at a time where you literally need help. And so
Mhm.
you're already kind of overwhelmed and trying to work on your own stuff at the same time. Um, and so I want to be respectful of our time and kind of use our minutes left here for the kind of open floor. I mean, you've already shared so much, but if there's a point we haven't covered that you think could be useful to the community to hear, we'd definitely love to hear it.
Yeah, so I want to go ahead and share one of my favorite quotes that I've come up with in the work that I've been doing. And it's that the strongest man in the room has nothing to do with how much he can lift. It has to do with how much he can share. And I think that is so important, because that statement right there kind of aligns with what we were talking about when it comes to physical and mental health. But it also talks about the strength that comes in vulnerability. And it's just so important that we get that message out there, because I think I battled with my eating disorder and anxiety and OCD for 15 plus years in silence. And had I opened up and started to share, I could have begun healing a lot earlier in life. And I think that's so important for everyone to know, that regardless of what they're going through out there, start to share, because that's when you begin to heal.
Yeah, I love that. It's an once your eyes are open to the framework where vulnerability is strength, and you realize how much strength it takes to share something difficult, um, it really opens up the world to powerful conversations that can really help you, can really help others, and everyone grows. But there's just this simple but strong layer, a barrier to preventing a lot of men from sharing that initial vulnerability. So I think that's a very fitting quote, both for your story and I think a very effective one for a lot of guys who can kind of see um, the strength that comes from vulnerability. I think you're a great example of it. It's so clear that your story comes from a place of strength, and I'm of the mind that hardship makes good people if they can share. Because the people who can share are the people who really made really good progress against their own hardship. So that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. It's one of those things where I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said I would have never wanted to go through an eating disorder, and I would never wish it upon myself or anybody else. But now that it's happened, I can make good of it. I can get out there and change that narrative and break through that stigma, because I've got a different perspective on things now, and I've found my voice, and I'm out there. This is now my mission. What was once my battle is now my mission, and hopefully we can help others in the process.
That's awesome. Yeah, awesome. Well, it's so nice to meet you. Thanks for sharing. And yeah, we'll be in touch in the future.
All right, thanks so much, and thank you for the work you're doing. It's
Of
pretty
course,
incredible.
it's the best. I get to meet really awesome people. So
All right, well, take care.
take care. Have a good rest of the day.
Okay, bye.
Bye.